Good morning. How y'all doing, folks? My name is Nick. This is Otto, the garden cat, my co-star, and this is the Tierra Permaculture vlog. Back at it today. Nice to have 2 days in a row back here. It's always nice to be able to actually spend time out in the homestead, so I'm excited to be able to do that today. Today we're going to turn the compost pile. I'm going to talk a little bit about how I know the compost pile is doing well. That's something that a couple of you guys have asked about. I have mentioned it in previous videos, but I haven't done one that's more focused on that, so I will focus on that as much as I can today. And after that, I'm just going to do a little bit of grass harvest and maintenance, because if you look back here, you can see it's pretty much like a little miniature grassland happening here, and I got to take care of that. So that's what I'm working on today, and well, yeah, let's just get started. We did get a little bit of rain last night, not too much, just over 4 mil. So enough to kind of keep everything wet, but if you watched yesterday, if you didn't watch yesterday's video, check it out. I'll leave it linked above right here. But in that video, I actually measure out a full, what was it? I think 3.5 inches of rain that we got over 2.5-ish days, and then we had an inch of rain before that. So we have a lot of rain because of a tropical wave that came through. I'm gonna get ready to get the chicken feed all set. So if you just bear with me, I'll be right back. So if you didn't watch yesterday's video, I did link it before this, but basically what happened is we lost a chick over the weekend, sadly. Unknown cause, actually. My guess is a snake, maybe. But there's no sign of any sort of struggle or anything like that. So we're just kind of like, oh, well, hopefully we'll not lose another one. So the only thing we're doing differently is basically closing up the coop now. I hadn't been closing it because we just have never had an issue with predator pressure, but let's keep the coop closed so the chicks are a little bit bigger and can fend for themselves. So if you watch my videos for a while, you know I usually walk the other way next to the chicken coop, but we actually have a new chick with us. We've adopted this from our friends Megan and Rob. They basically saved her. She was abandoned by her mama. They're leaving though in about a month-ish, month and a half. So they wanted to kind of start getting the chick more adapted to a chicken family. So we've taken it on. So I'm basically just giving her feed. I believe it's a her, despite the name being Henry. I'm pretty sure it's a her. And our only issue, or a couple issues, one, the cat. When the first day that she was here, the cat got a little bit rambunctious and decided that he wanted to play, and the play ended up being chasing this chicken all around. So now Otto associates this chick with playtime and always wants to be chasing and having fun with her, but we need to kind of break that habit. So I'm constantly having to push her away. But also, this chick is not quite welcome to our current group of rooster and hens. They don't really want to welcome this new one in quite yet. Into the chickens. Hey, mama. So we lost one of our 2 or 3 baby chicks. So there's only 2 down there now, but everyone's still doing all right. Everyone's quite happy, and they're loving the compost down there. They're scratching through it, and this will be a fun time because every time I'm in here trying to work with the chicks, mama gets all uppity with me, so it should be kind of interesting. I'm basically going to be turning the compost pile to right where she is, because it's kind of stood here now. We're moving it down. So let's talk about the compost pile, since that's what we're going to be kind of focusing on mainly. Right now it's just over 100 degrees, so it's actually down to like the kind of stable temperature at this point. I haven't turned it since last Thursday, I believe, so it's been about 5 or 6 days. So it's been a while since it's been turned, but that's what I'm doing now. I'm letting it mature. So I'm allowing the compost pile, after it heated up the first 3 times, I'm now letting it mature and letting the fungal growth kind of start to take over more so than the bacteria. So what happens is, when I'm not turning it at all, I'm not constantly adding air, so I'm not like fast tracking the compost, so it takes a little bit longer. So that's why I kind of reduced temperature. But last time I turned it, it actually was down to 100, and then after I turned it, it shot back up to about 120, 125. That's about 50 Celsius if you're in a place that uses Celsius. So it went basically from about, let's see, I'll just show you on the, it'll be much easier. So when I last turned it, it was right around here, right around that 100 mark. Looks like about 30, well, just around 40 Celsius. just over or just under 40 Celsius. So that's where it was, and then after I turned it, it shot right back up to about just over 120, about 50 Celsius. So by turning it, what you're doing is you're aerating the pile, and you're encouraging all the aerobic organisms to have like a nice big breath of fresh air, and then they'll start kind of reproducing again. So I'm going to turn it right now, and we'll talk about the turn and what I'm noticing, and then how to tell if this pile is going well, or if it needs a little bit, there's some problems with it. I actually don't know yet. We're going to find out as we go. All right, so starting with this compost now. I kind of started by moving a little bit this downhill just to give me some more room to work with. And I'm going to be turning the pile kind of right where this little depression is right here. And then we're going to look at what's in this pile, which is the original pile that has yet to been scratched at all. And right as I'm starting to talk about this, we have a little bit of rain coming in, but I think it's just gonna be a little sprinkle, so no big deal. If you're incorporating chickens into your system, one good way to know that your compost is doing well is they're interested in it. So if they're really into kind of scratching and trying to find all the little critters that are coming around the compost pile, it's a really good indication they have a lot of microbial life in there that are that's beneficial for the compost pile. These guys will pretty much crawl nonstop and look for insects nonstop if you have a good compost pile, and that's exactly what I'm seeing here. Especially when I disturb the soil a little bit, it basically is allowing more aeration and more things to be revealed that they didn't see before, and that's going to basically jumpstart the process of them trying to look for stuff through the pile. So we're actually now, I'm going to dig into this one a little bit, and then I'm going to take out a little bit and we'll look at it and talk about whether or not it's doing well, what I think about it, etc. All right, so I just dug out a little bit, and I'm starting to look in through the pile here. So it's nice and warm still. Like I said, we should know it's about 100 degrees. And so what I'm going to do is basically start looking at the actual contents of the pile. Smell. So that's the first one I'm going to talk about. Smell is a really good indication of whether or not your compost pile is doing well or if you have problems. So if you smell it, it shouldn't smell bad. Your compost pile should never smell bad. If it's smelling bad, that means you have anaerobic activity, and the anaerobic activity is going to cause all those kind of putrid smells that you do not want to be smelling. So if at any point in your compost kind of journey, your compost pile smells bad, you need to think, okay, there's either too much water or too little air. Those things usually go hand in hand. If you have too little air, often that's caused by too much water, and vice versa. So that's one thing I'm seeing here. So smell, I don't have any bad smell. I'm actually going to pull into the stuff that's right at the edge where it might have gotten a little extra water. And yeah, still not a bad smell. So the smell you're going for by the end of a compost pile is kind of like forest floor. Excuse me, Mama, I'm trying to talk. The smell you're trying to go for is like the kind of forest floor. Like if you go into like really mature forest and grab a handful of soil and smell it, that's the smell you're going for. Right now, I don't have quite that smell, and that's expected because at this point the fungi are still developing. So that smell that you're smelling is really the fungi in the pile. As they reproduce, they start to, Mama, I'm holding it for you. What's the deal? As the fungi reproduce and start putting out their hyphae into all the kind of compost pile, etc., whatever's kind of growing, whether it's soil or in a compost pile, they start to put out their little hyphae all through the pile, and then that plus the breakdown causes essentially humic acid and fulvic acids to be produced during the breakdown process, and that's kind of that smell. Humic acid is that smell of forest floor. Fulvic acid, I believe, is a little bit sweeter in smell. So that's kind of another thing to think of, but the really sweet smell that you smell in a compost pile would likely be actinobacteria. If you ever have, let's see if I can find any, I'm sure there's a little bit. If you have like small, tiny little white strands in your pile and your pile smells a little bit iffy, that's likely actinobacteria. Actinobacteria live right on the edge of aerobic and anaerobic conditions. So they're right on that edge. They're a good indication if you're getting that smell and you see a lot of like white little filaments throughout your pile at the very beginning and your pile doesn't smell good. It's a really good indication that you don't have enough airspace. or you have too much water in there. So either one is pretty much, again, hand in hand. They marry with each other and they're kind of the same. So that's a good indication. Smell, that's kind of that first thing. The second thing I'm looking for is color. So right now this color is kind of like a dark brown. It's kind of almost I'd say it's about ow, mama. This mama is very protective of her chicks and she believes that this is her area. Despite me opening the gate down there for her. Ow, mama. So the color of your compost pile is another really good indication one way or the other. First, I mean, looking at the materials themselves, this right here, there's still a bunch of organic material. Let me get you a little bit closer to make sure you're actually getting a good shot of this. This right here, if you look at that color, it's kind of a nice dark brown color. It's not black, it's kind of a dark brown. And that's what you're looking for. You're kind of looking for what Dr. Elaine Ingham says. She's an amazing person in kind of the compost soil food web world. Is doing amazing work. Highly recommend checking her out. I'll leave her channel linked above, or at least one of her videos linked above, so you can check it out. But what she calls for is you want the color to be about 70% chocolate. If you get like a 70% dark chocolate bar, that's the color you're looking for in your compost pile. Nice dark chocolate, not black, but like a nice deep brown color. That's the color you're looking for. So if your compost is more black, that's a pretty good indication that it has gone aerobic at some point. The black ends up usually being caused by a lack of air space in there, and just kind of anaerobic breakdown of materials. So you don't want black. And if you have materials that are like completely not broken down at all, that's also a pretty good sign that you're not quite there yet. So color is a good thing, so check out your color. I'll try to get a couple little shots in here. So this is, you can see here, let's also look at all the materials in here. So right now the compost pile is not finished yet, but we're going along well. You can still see all the organic material in here. It's not quite broken down yet, so I know this pile is not done yet. There's still likely to be some organic material that's not broken down, even a finished compost pile. But when you see this much material that's clearly in its original kind of form, it's a really good indication that it's still processing. So you still want to give it more time. So that's a good indication of, okay, not quite done yet, still need to keep going. So keep looking at the organic material. When it's completely done, you're going to be left more with something even less than that. Like see these small little particles over here? That's what you're looking for. Those small little kind of particles, and most of your compost pile should be close to that by the end. Quick, very brief summary of what I just talked about. Smell. If it smells bad at all, if your compost pile has a rank smell, something's wrong. Usually that's too much water or too little airspace. Again, those things go hand in hand. Second of all, the color. If your color is a black, a really, really dark kind of black color, that's a pretty good indication that you've gotten anaerobic at some point. Especially, usually you'll find that blackness in the middle of the pile. If the pile did go anaerobic, that's usually where it will go anaerobic first, right in the center. So if you find really, really dark black material in the center of your pile when you're turning it, that's a good indication that you have gone anaerobic, and that's a bad thing. Again, you can fix that if you keep turning it and keep processing this pile. That will get fixed. So keep working on it. And then looking at the actual materials, if you're seeing a slow breakdown of material and things are starting to actually become less of the original material that they were, that's a really good indication that your compost pile is doing well, right? Other than obviously the thermometer, having a thermometer is one of the best ways to tell like the activity in your pile, how active your pile is with all the microbiology reproducing in there. So that's something really handy if you can get a compost thermometer. If you can't, then use the stuff I've just said about smell, the color, heat. Also, if you're turning the pile and you don't have a thermometer, if you're turning it and there's lots of heat and steam in the middle, that's a good indication that you have lots of reproduction, microbiological reproduction in there. And then just looking at the contents of the pile, seeing if they're actually breaking down, see what level of breakdown they're in. This is basically strands of hay right here. It's still intact, so I know that we still have time before this is actually finished. It's a pretty obvious when you're turning your pile and when you're managing your pile. If at any point you go, oh, I don't think that's right, it's probably not right. That's pretty much the gist of it, right? And typically what it is most, and at least in my experience, most of the time that if you're getting anaerobic conditions, you basically don't have enough carbon material to add structure to your pile, to add airspace into your piles. That's what I noticed that most people like. They have lots of food scraps, they have lots of grass clippings, they have lots of fresh green material, not so much brown material like that woody stuff that's really structural and will maintain intact and maintain the airspace in between all the other particles. So if you do notice that your compost pile tends to be going towards the stinky side, you probably don't have enough structure in your pile, and the structure comes from that high carbon or that woody material in your pile. So basically when you turn, you can add more, re-wet down the pile as you're turning, and keep going. Compost pile, you know, if you do it right, it can be done in as little as 18 days, or really as little as 10 days actually. But if more likely, it's going to be more like a month-ish if you're turning it on a somewhat regular basis and managing it and you get everything right. It'll be about a month to having like nice finished compost. But it can just take longer if you're having an anaerobic kick and something went wrong. Add some more kind of woody material, get your compost pile nice and aerated, and keep going. If your pile never heat up enough, you can just basically add a lot of nitrogen as you turn the pile to try to help jumpstart the pile and keep it going. So there's so many options for you to do to keep your pile going, and please leave questions below. I'm happy to answer those things. If you have compost questions, if you have a compost pile that's you started and it's not quite working, or it is working, let me know. Tell me what you're experiencing. Tell me your experience, because that really helps me help other people by knowing things that you've gone through, so I can make sure I can answer those and explain those in a nice, concise way. So now that we've talked about all that, I'm actually going to start turning the pile as best I can with Mama watching over me with her chicks. I know that you've noticed during when I was just talking there that Mom was very intense on coming in and attacking me, and she's just trying to defend her little pile land. So I don't fault her for that, although it's quite annoying when I'm trying to do something that's really good for her and good for this compost pile. So I'm going to get turning, and I'll talk to you right after. All right, there's a finished pile after turning. Mama is only somewhat annoying the whole time. But you can see right underneath where I turned, Mama's searching all over the place for little bugs and little critters that go through the compost pile. And that's exactly what I want. So this compost pile is actually acting as another feed source for me, for my chickens. The chickens love to eat all the microbiology within the pile. Not really the micro, I guess, the more macrobiology. They like the little insects and worms and everything that come and feed on the smaller stuff. So I'm just recovering from all that and a little hot and sweaty now. Yeah, they love to eat all that stuff. So it's actually helping give my chickens a nice, really healthy, protein-rich food source by attracting all those little bugs that crawl into the compost pile. So that's helping feed my chickens and get my chicks nice and strong as they're starting. Yeah, so during the turn, I noticed just a couple things. One, there's a couple spots where it was dry, so I did add some water at some point, and I'm actually just going to spray it down really quick because everything that's towards the top right now is a little bit dry as well. You'll notice that this pile is a little bit kind of taller and more peaked than my usual piles, and that's mainly because when I started, I didn't make the base wide enough. So as I came up, I didn't have enough room to push it all out. It kept falling over, so I had to kind of keep it more of like a peaked compost pile than like a nice flat top. I prefer a flat top, one, because my chickens can jump on top and have a nice like large space to kind of crawl around in there, but two, because it kind of helps me keep my pile at a kind of uniform width, and I can constantly be tracking how much is there, how much I'm losing, etc. So that's just my personal preference. A peaked pile isn't a bad thing. Most people use a peaked pile. I just prefer a kind of more cylindrical, flat-shaped, flat-topped pile personally. Just my style. Yeah, so that's the turn. We talked about kind of how to know if your compost pile is doing well, etc. And I was actually gonna do some grass maintenance with you guys, but I think this video is long enough, so I'm just gonna do that on my own and not take you guys along the ride. I think you'll be okay with that. You've seen me do grass maintenance plenty of times before, so yeah, I'm just going to spray down the pile real quick to make sure those top layers get enough moisture, have that 50% moisture. Again, when you're turning your compost pile, constantly be checking the moisture level. Pretty easy to tell if it's too moist, and pretty much to check your moisture level, take a clump of compost in your hand or in a glove. At this point, my compost is pretty well broken down, so I'm more comfortable using just my hand. When I first start and I have that fresh manure, I like to wear gloves, but at this point, there's no kind of clear manure fragments left over, so, and it's all been to the center of the pile, so it's killed any pathogens that might be there. So, but what you do is basically take a handful of compost and squeeze with all your might. And you're looking for 1 to 2 drops, and that's 50% moisture, and that's what you want. If you have more than that, more drops than that, it's too wet. If you don't have any drops, it's too dry. So it's just a really easy way to kind of tell whether or not your pile has enough moisture or not. So yeah, that's it for me today. If you do like what I'm doing, please subscribe to the channel. I'm over 110 subscribers now, super excited. Reached that 100 mark, and now we're just kind of continuing to boom upwards. So love to keep that boom going, and really appreciate you guys and your support for everything here. Everything I'm doing. All right, guys, yeah, until next time, have a good one.